Prison food psychology: what inmates eat is rewiring their minds. Inside every prison, there is a silent force shaping behavior, controlling emotions, and influencing inmate decisions more than any guard, gang, or rule ever could. It is not punishment. It is not isolation. It's the food, the meals that millions of inmates depend on, tolerate, trade, manipulate, or resist every single day. And the psychology behind those meals is more powerful than anyone on the outside imagines. This documentary contains descriptions of prison conditions and violence for educational purposes based on verified sources. Viewer discretion is advised. For more deep research of prison documentary like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Prison food is often mocked, ignored, or written off as part of the price of incarceration. But according to studies from the National Institute of Justice and Psychological Research analyzed by Craig Haney, the structure of institutional diets plays a direct role in mood regulation, aggression, compliance, and even cognitive functioning. It's more than nutrition. It's mental conditioning. The American Psychological Association notes that monotony, lack of control, and deprivation inside correctional environments compound stress responses, and food becomes one of the very few emotional outlets inmates have left. This documentary uncovers the behavioral systems hidden behind institutional meals, how they shape survival, reward, punishment, hierarchy, and everyday mental stability. And to understand this system, we begin with where everything changes first, the moment an inmate's relationship with food is rewired. The first meal shock. Every inmate remembers their first meal, not because of the taste, but because of what it represents psychologically. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation reports that new inmates consistently describe the first tray as the moment reality becomes undeniable. The tray is cold, standardized, portioned without personalization, a perfect symbol of the loss of autonomy Dr. Haney identifies as the foundation of institutional conditioning. For many, that first meal does something immediate. It strips away familiarity. One former inmate, documented in a non-fiction behavioral interview archived by the Chicago Crime Lab, described it this way. You aren't hungry. You're just confused. Everything smells different. Everything looks the same. You start to realize nothing in here will be about you anymore. Psychologists note this reaction as identity compression, a rapid narrowing of personal choice that forces the mind to adapt to a world where agency is limited. The food is simply the trigger. Inmates with no previous mental health issues often report a sudden emotional flattening within their first 48 hours, a pattern supported by APA research on environmental stress and loss of autonomy. The food doesn't cause it, but the meal becomes the first symbol of it. And for some inmates, that symbol becomes a turning point, shaping how they behave, who they trust, and how they survive the weeks ahead. The control mechanism hidden in every tray. Across US and UK correctional systems, institutional meals follow strict patterns, fixed calories, repeated menus, identical portions. But behind this routine is a psychological structure so subtle that inmates usually don't notice it, though their behavior changes because of it. According to the National Institute of Justice, the purpose of meal standardization isn't just budgeting or logistics. It's behavioral stabilization. Predictable meals reduce unpredictability, and predictable environments reduce conflict. On paper, it's simple. In practice, it's something far deeper. The loss of choice as behavioral conditioning. Psychologist Craig Haney has long documented the effects of removing autonomy in prisons. When inmates are denied choices, even small ones like what to eat, the brain gradually adapts by lowering expectations, reducing initiative, and entering what researchers describe as a compliance shift. Not obedience. Not submission. A psychological repositioning where the mind begins to accept that emotional wants are irrelevant. Food becomes the tool that reinforces that shift 3 times a day. As Haney's research notes, routine deprivation doesn't provoke rebellion. It produces detached acceptance, a state that correctional systems rely on to maintain order. How inmates react to that loss of control. Every inmate reacts differently. John Irwin's field interviews describe 3 psychological archetypes that emerge in response to institutional meals. 1. The adapters. These inmates accept the meals quickly. They are not necessarily at peace. They simply conserve emotional energy. Psychologists say they exhibit environmental compliance, a coping mechanism formed to navigate powerlessness without burning out. 2. The traders. To them, food becomes currency, an economic system inside a system. The Chicago Crime Lab found that bartering food allows these inmates to recreate a sense of autonomy. The food isn't just calories, it becomes personal agency in a place designed to remove it. 3. The resistors. A smaller group refuses meals or picks at them, not out of defiance but identity preservation. According to the APA, these inmates struggle with institutional conformity and attempt to maintain self-definition through the only choice they can control, what they swallow. The result is the same across all groups. The food becomes psychological architecture, a framework that shapes decisions, emotions, and social behavior long before inmates settle into the rhythm of incarceration. Hunger, mood, and the hidden triggers. It's not just the food itself, it's the timing, composition, and scarcity that shape inmate behavior. Research from the National Institute of Justice and behavioral studies from the Chicago Crime Lab show that even minor fluctuations in meal quality or timing can dramatically impact mood, aggression, and social interactions. The science of hunger and aggression. Studies confirm what many inmates intuitively know. Hunger is a powerful amplifier of emotion. Low blood sugar combined with the stress of incarceration triggers irritability, risk-taking, and heightened sensitivity to social cues. The APA reports that repetitive low-calorie or high-carb meals can spike aggression and reduce impulse control. In practical terms, a delayed tray, missing protein, or unexpected menu change can transform a tense hallway into a flashpoint for conflict. One former inmate interviewed by John Irwin described, "It wasn't the fight over the food, it was how we felt when it didn't arrive how it should. Anger, frustration, paranoia. That's when the blocks got tense." Mood manipulation through meals. Psychologists note that institutional meals subtly train emotional responses. Predictable meals soothe. Repetitive or subpar meals induce stress habituation, a constant low-level tension that reshapes social behavior. This tension is not accidental. According to Haney and other correctional psychologists, the structured monotony of meals is part of the broader architecture of behavioral control. By regulating something as fundamental as food, institutions influence cognitive patterns and emotional thresholds without explicit coercion. Food as a social tool. Beyond biological effects, meals serve as a social and psychological currency. Sharing, trading, and saving food builds alliances. Hoarding becomes an assertion of status. Declining meals or selective eating signals resistance. Even when prisoners think they are acting independently, their behavior is being shaped by the invisible system behind the tray. The psychology is subtle but powerful. The very act of eating, or not eating, becomes a measure of adaptation, hierarchy, and mental resilience inside prison walls. The long-term mind shift of institutional meals. By the second week of incarceration, the initial shock of prison meals evolves into a longer-term psychological adaptation. Research from Craig Haney, the NIJ, and John Irwin shows that the simple act of eating in a controlled, repetitive system can rewire thinking patterns, emotional responses, and even social strategies. The psychology of routine and submission. Institutional psychologists describe this as cognitive flattening. Inmates begin to anticipate, rather than react. Emotional peaks are dampened, anger and excitement are measured, that decision-making becomes more constrained by routine and expectation than by personal desire. The meals, always at fixed times, in identical portions, act as a behavioral anchor. This is not about hunger, but about predictability shaping thought. Over time, inmates internalize the structure and unconsciously align their behavior with the environment. Food as a stress modulator. Nutrition directly affects cognitive function. High-carb, low-protein meals, common in many prisons, contribute to fatigue, reduced concentration, and irritability. According to the APA, the monotony of the diet can also exacerbate anxiety and depressive symptoms. Former inmates interviewed in the Chicago Crime Lab study report subtle but pervasive effects. After a month, you stop noticing what's on the tray, but you feel it. Your patience, your energy, even the way you think about others, it's all tied to what you eat. Hierarchy, power, and the food system. In survival strategies, how inmates navigate the food system. By the third week of incarceration, most inmates have begun developing strategies to cope with and exploit the institutional food system. The subtle psychological pressures of meals, monotony, deprivation, and controlled choice have already reshaped behavior, cognition, and social interactions. Adaptive strategies. Coping without rebellion. Haney's research identifies a set of adaptive coping mechanisms that inmates use to maintain mental stability. Meal rationing, saving portions for later, creating a sense of control over scarcity. Selective eating, choosing certain items while avoiding others to assert personal preference. Silent compliance, following meal routines to minimize conflict. Conserving energy for more important social interactions. These strategies are not just survival tactics, they are psychological defenses. In a system designed to strip autonomy, food becomes a small but crucial avenue for retaining identity and agency. Food as a social and psychological currency. The Chicago Crime Lab reports that trading and sharing food is one of the most reliable ways to build alliances. Establish trust within social group, signal loyalty or reciprocity, influence hierarchical status on the block. Even seemingly trivial exchanges, a slice of bread, an extra portion of fruit, become tools of negotiation, leverage, and control. Resistance and identity preservation. Not all inmates comply or adapt smoothly. According to John Irwin, some use meals as a form of silent resistance. Hoarding food as a personal statement, skipping meals to assert control over their body, critically evaluating food quality and distribution to question authority. This subtle form of defiance may appear minor, but it is psychologically significant. It allows inmates to maintain a sense of self in an environment designed to erode individuality. The mental cost of survival strategies. While adaptive strategies aid survival, they also reshape cognition and emotional responses over time. Constant monitoring of meals increases hypervigilance. Trading food reinforces social hierarchies, and dependency resistance requires mental energy, often increasing stress. The prison food system, therefore, functions on multiple levels. Biological, meeting minimal nutritional needs. Psychological, shaping mood, behavior, and compliance. Social, reinforcing hierarchies and survival strategies. Inmates do not just eat, they navigate a complex psychological ecosystem every single meal. The long-term psychological impact of prison meals. By the second month of incarceration, the effects of institutional meals begin to manifest in deeper cognitive and emotional patterns. According to Craig Haney, the APA, and longitudinal studies by the NIJ, repetitive food environments are not merely a minor inconvenience, they are powerful agents of psychological conditioning. Cognitive shifts and emotional regulation. Repetitive meals contribute to a form of cognitive flattening. Reduced initiative and creativity, heightened reliance on routine for decision-making, increased mental fatigue and susceptibility to environmental stress. The APA confirms that monotony and low-nutrient diets contribute to diminished executive functioning, making inmates more prone to risk aversion and compliance. Essentially, their thought patterns adapt to survive within the confines of the system. Mental health consequences. While meals alone do not create psychological disorders, they interact with existing stressors to influence mental health. Mood instability, increased anxiety and irritability, heightened sensitivity to perceived social threats. The Chicago Crime Lab notes that these subtle changes amplify block-level tensions. A small conflict during mealtime can escalate faster than it would outside prison because hunger, deprivation, and monotony heighten emotional reactivity. Behavioral patterns and institutional survival. Inmates develop anticipatory behaviors around meals. Timing movements to coincide with food availability, negotiating alliances to secure portions, avoiding conflicts triggered by hunger or scarcity. Haney's studies describe this as behavioral tuning. a subconscious alignment of daily actions to the psychological pressures imposed by institutional meals. The food system silently teaches compliance, patience, and strategic thinking, skills that become second nature after weeks or months inside. Food as a psychological anchor. Institutional meals become more than sustenance. They are a psychological anchor. Predictable trays provide emotional stability in an otherwise volatile environment. Even subpar meals create a rhythm inmates can rely on. The act of eating punctuates time, shaping the perception of days, weeks, and months. Former inmates interviewed by John Irwin described the meals as a baseline for mental equilibrium. It's not about liking the food, it's knowing it will come. That's what keeps your mind from unraveling. Through this lens, prison meals are not just physical fuel, they are emotional scaffolding, social currency, and cognitive conditioning all in one. Extreme adaptation. How inmates internalize the system. By months 3 and beyond, the interplay of institutional meals, monotony, and social hierarchy culminates in extreme psychological adaptation. Research from Craig Haney, John Irwin, and the NIJ demonstrates that inmates' minds begin to operate on the rules imposed by the food system, often unconsciously. Survival through internalization. Inmates do not just react to meals, they internalize the patterns. They anticipate menu cycles, they strategize around portion distribution, they modulate behavior according to how others interact with food. This internalization allows inmates to predict social and emotional outcomes, effectively giving them control in an environment designed to strip it. Real inmate stories. One former maximum security inmate, interviewed by the Chicago Crime Lab, described, "I learned quickly which blocks I could get extra food in, and which blocks I just stayed out of. It wasn't about being greedy, it was survival." Another noted, "Food wasn't just something to eat. It told you who was in charge, who could be trusted, who'd turn on you if something went wrong." These first-hand accounts reveal a psychological truth. Food is deeply tied to social cognition, trust, and strategy inside prison. Extreme psychological outcomes. Long-term adaptation produces a variety of mental patterns. Heightened patience and strategic thinking. Inmates learn to delay gratification, plan ahead, and negotiate subtle power dynamics. Behavioral conformity. Some internalize routines so deeply they adopt institutional rhythms automatically, reducing conflict. Selective resistance. Others use food-based choices to quietly preserve self-identity, asserting agency in a system designed to remove it. The silent lesson of meals. Institutional meals teach more than compliance. They teach how to navigate a constrained environment while maintaining mental resilience. Every tray, every exchange, every bite is a psychological test. Those who survive mentally are not the strongest physically, but the most adaptable cognitively and emotionally. In essence, prison food is both the teacher and the curriculum. The mind adapts, strategies evolve, and social hierarchies are constantly negotiated, all under the subtle influence of what appears to be a simple meal. The hidden power of prison meals. What we've uncovered is clear. Prison meals are never just food. They are instruments of behavior, tools of survival, and subtle forces shaping the human mind. From the first tray shock to long-term cognitive adaptation, every bite inside a correctional facility carries weight beyond nutrition. The NIJ, APA, and researchers like Haney and Irwin consistently show that institutional food shapes mood, aggression, and impulse control, influences social hierarchies and alliances, serves as a measure of resilience, compliance, and identity. Even something as mundane as a tray of food becomes a psychological blueprint for life inside prison walls. If you found this exploration of prison psychology through food revealing, insightful, or even shocking, here's what to do next. White heavy checkmark subscribe for more deep dive documentaries into the hidden psychology of prisons and criminal behavior. White heavy checkmark like and share. Help others understand the subtle forces shaping inmate lives. White heavy checkmark comment. Tell us which psychological insight surprised you the most. The story of institutional meals isn't just about survival, it's about understanding the human mind under pressure, the invisible rules we all follow, and how psychology quietly governs behavior, even behind bars. Stay curious. Stay informed. And remember, even a tray of food can change the mind forever.